So I want to share some information that will be helpful in your faith walk with God. Um, I recall when, I first started trusting Him that I was told by God about storehouses that were in heaven. And it's touched a little on Scripture. Uh, the first mention of storehouses was when Joseph got all the grain, from people and put it into the storehouses for 7 years of the famine. And so that grain was used at that time to take care of any needs that came. And so, today, banks and such is the equivalent of, these storehouses. People save money, just to rely on it at a later time, when, circumstances come up and they're in need. So they have nothing, left but to, rely on those storehouses. And, looked up on Google, and, another name for storehouse is a warehouse. So you can think along the lines that, what God told me is that there were storehouses in heaven. So whatever need that anybody has, they access those storehouses in heaven by faith. And I'll get to that soon. So, man tends to rely on his bank account and such in this world, and that's what he relies on. That's his source, of reliance. And so when that is affected, then he's dismayed. And I recall Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and rust destroy, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven." So we have treasures up there. We have storehouses up in heaven that we have yet to access by faith. And there's a lot of Christians, like I said in many of my other videos, that don't have a clue of what faith is. And any, action that they see anybody depending on God for, would be called lazy. And they're only seeing from the eyes of the worldly point of view, and they're not looking at anybody's situation who's walking by faith through the eyes of faith, because they have never walked in it themselves. And if they don't walk in it themselves, they're not going to operate out of the spiritual way of thinking. They're going to operate only out of the world's ways of doing things. So we are not to store up for ourselves treasures on earth, because they can be taken away or they can be destroyed. So I was looking up the definition of the storehouse, and it's a building for storing goods. So, likewise, we have, these storehouses in heaven that we can access. And the thing is a lot of Christians don't know how to walk in faith. A lot of them don't know how to access these storehouses by faith. So I want to really, touch on it a little bit. I mean, you've seen my other videos. This is only a continuation. This is an encouragement, to have as you are walking by faith, in God. And that's what the 700 videos section is. It's for those that God has led into trusting God by faith. If you're new to my videos, then, I would suggest that you would check from 0 and work your way up, because they're like building blocks to help you, lead you from that place of where you're trusting yourself and your logical mind into trusting God, to where you surrender your will and you live for Jesus. And I need to put my window down. It's a little toasty in here. So, those who trust in the Lord, He will provide for them. I mean, they are children of God. So, like a father cares for his children, the Lord will care for us. But, what they really encounter in this world is alternate thinking from those of the world that, keep them from trusting God by faith, because of the judgments that are in this world about people. They're looking on, people on the surface of things. And so since they only judge by the surface, they don't bother looking at the heart. And they, like me, they won't bother asking the person what they're doing. Instead they satisfy themselves in judging somebody by the surface. So God once told me that there are storehouses in heaven you have yet to access by faith. And since God told me that, I was amazed. I said, wow, I really need to start walking in faith for these things, in which I did, and I got to the point to where I started believing and not doubting. So that is the only way that you can access these storehouses, is by believing in God and what God can do, reading in Scripture about what He can do. And once you read in Scripture and you can see how Jesus has provided, how God has provided in the past, you use that as an example in walking in faith for yourself. So like I said, you can access your storehouses by faith. So whenever, you may need something, ask God, wait for it, and then it will come through. But be sure that there is no doubt that's coming in. So this next section is a but. And I just want to, just give you a little heads up. Just to make sure, if you've seen all my videos from 00 on, you know that I'm the biggest, the biggest thing I say is about Christians not loving money. So, if you haven't asked God to take away any desire for money, I would suggest that you would do that. Because there's a lot of Christians out there that would be like, oh, I got a lot of money, in my storehouses in heaven, I can ask God for $100,000. And, that's the thinking that they have. But, what does that say? That means that you love money. And, that's something that, you shouldn't desire at all. Jesus said, don't lay up treasures on earth. And that's exactly what that is. So ask God to take away that love of money from you. So, God once told me, He said that you could be trusted with money when you don't love it. And the fact is that when I surrendered my will to God, I did love money. And it was something that He had to work in me. And that's something that He continuously has to work in you and I, to get that out. Because it's so very easy to fall into that trap, of having money and then not having enough of it. And in an earlier video, I already mentioned that, the wealthy were asked, what they would need to be happy, and they said 30% more. But the fact is that when they receive that 30%, they're going to want more. So once you have money, you will never have enough of it. So get to that place of where you don't love money, that, you could just ask God to help you to be content with what you need. All we need is our daily bread. If the Apostle Paul said, I have learned to live on little and I have learned to live on a lot. And we must be in the center of that, to where, all we really need is to live by bread alone. All we need is God and His love, because when we weigh that against anything in this world, nothing really matters but Him. So, be content with your daily needs. If you're, got food and clothing, you thank God for that. Whatever you need, ask Him. And just be sure that you're not laying up treasures in heaven. I'm going to end here. Thanks for taking the time to watch.